Welcome to the Branding Laboratory, where we explore the art and science of branding. I'm your host, Deevo Tindall, brand strategist, storyteller, and master photographer. Join us as we dive deep into the captivating stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you elevate your brand and connect deeply with your audience. Let's get started. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with Paige Arnof-Fenn. Am I saying your name correctly, Arnof?
Absolutely are.
All right. She is an accomplished entrepreneur, to say the least. She is a branding expert, hence why she's on the show. And she is the founder and CEO of Mavens and Moguls, which I'm really excited to get to know a little bit more about that. It's a global branding and digital marketing firm, and she works with clients ranging from early stage startups all the way to Fortune 500 companies. And your resume of companies that you worked for is quite prolific. I feel like I'm in the presence of a celebrity here. But Colgate, Virgin, Microsoft, New York Times, the list goes on. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where you're on our little show today. So thank you for coming down to the little plebes and speaking with us. But your impressive career includes some pretty serious roles. Vice President of Marketing at Zipcar and Inc., SVP of Marketing at Launch Media, which was later absorbed by Yahoo. You've served as a special assistant to the chief marketing officer for Coca-Cola. Again, the list is on and on. Like, I could probably spend the entirety of the show talking about your accolades. But beyond your corporate roles, you have been a founding board member of Women Entrepreneurs in Science and Technology. I want to hear a little bit about that because I love the fact that it's really funny to me. I see a lot of CEOs that I interview, they go on to do these board member roles, philanthropic roles, and it's really cool to see you giving back to the community in the way that you do. And it's really a kind of a highlight that all entrepreneurs should aspire to. You've achieved a modicum of success. Now, how can you help other people grow and evolve? And really wanted to explore that a little bit with you. You have I didn't know this about you till I started doing some stalking on you, but you have an undergraduate degree from Stanford, Jesus, and an MBA from Harvard. Wow. Okay. Like I said, I'm in the presence of a celebrity here. I want to learn a little bit more about Mavens and Moguls, how you work with clients across various sectors and communications and research and PR and branding, all the things you're doing, and literally learn a little bit more about that because it sounds like you're brokering a bunch of different pieces in the marketing and branding world. And then I'm going to put you on the hot seat today, Paige, and learn how do you handle challenging situations, learn a little bit more about you personally, and then just have a good conversation on all the things that you've accomplished in your prolific career so far. So, all that being said, drum roll, welcome to the show.
Deevo, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's an honor, really. The honor is mine. So I want to start a little bit, if I may, with it's your origin story, your background, your motivations, and share with us what inspired you to leave the corporate world and embark on this entrepreneurial journey. A little bit about Mavens and Moguls, and you've got a really impressive career, as I talked about in the outset. If you could just walk us through, how did you get from there, working in the corporate world, to doing all those prolific things, to now running Mavens and Moguls?
So the short answer is I call myself the accidental entrepreneur. I had no interest in starting a business when I was young. If you had met me in college or business school, I would have sworn that I would be the next Meg Whitman. I was going to be a corporate renegade, Fortune 500 CEO, run a global business, maybe go up the ranks through. I started my career actually on Wall Street in the 80s. I was a finance person. I majored in economics and I fell enamored with the movie Wall Street, the original Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas and an Oscar. And so my first job out of college was as a financial analyst on Wall Street. And I did that for 2 years and realized that was not going to be my career path. So I went back and got an MBA and rebranded myself. I did a summer internship in marketing and really loved marketing from the start. And I've been in marketing ever since.
It's funny. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's funny to me how we have this disposition that we're going to take this straight line trajectory, right? And I think we talked about this a little bit when I first met you, or maybe we didn't. But I was having this conversation with someone else recently, and you go to school, you get a job, you go to college, you get your degree, you graduate, you get a really cool job or not in today's market world. and you feel like, okay, I'm in this space and it's going to be from here to there, and I'm just going to walk, I'm just going to go through this on this straight line, right? This linear output. But nowhere in any conversation of the most amazing people that I have met, and now your present company included, has anybody had a straight line? It's a squiggly, it's a loop back, it's a bump, it's a hiccup, it's a mogul, it's a fall down, it's a tumble, it's a roll. It's crazy to me. And my question, and I want to get back to your origin story. I didn't mean to interrupt, but why is this sort of concept not taught to us as young children, as college individuals, as graduates, that you hear these prolific speeches at graduation about, oh, you're going to go on to do great things and you're going to get a job and you're going to become the next C. But it never works out that way for most people who are truly successful. Why is that stuff not taught?
You were absolutely right. When I look at my career, it was such a circuitous route. And it's interesting because my dad and both my grandfathers were very successful business people. And my dad had a very linear path, and my grandfathers had very bumpy paths. But I always saw myself as a career person in business. I never thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that, just because business was in my family blood. And I don't know if you heard the famous Steve Jobs graduation
I
speech,
have, yeah.
but he says careers only make sense in retrospect, looking back. You
Mhm.
can't make sense looking forward because the breadcrumbs are not straight. You're absolutely right. And I think you have to figure out what your path is. You have to figure out what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. And the only way you know that is you learn to do by doing.
Mhm.
I thought I was cut out for Wall Street because my father and both my grandfathers were commercial bankers, and I was going to be the renegade going into investment banking. But I knew pretty early on, even though I was very good with numbers, very analytical, I didn't love the work. I wasn't having fun. It paid me really well, but I thought this is not my path. And when I went back to business school and I took a marketing class for the first time in my life, it like the light bulb went off and I was like, wow, this is good. This is fun. And it required both your left brain and your right brain. When I was in finance, it was just too one-sided. And I loved the fact that I was comfortable with numbers, I was good analytically, but there was a creative element as well. And that just made all the difference in the world. And so I started on a very corporate path. Like you said, I was at Procter and Gamble, Coca-Cola, the most recognized brands in the world, very corporate, very hierarchical. And again, even though I was good at it, it felt very structured, hierarchical, and I just felt too constrained. When the internet started taking off in the kind of mid to late 90s, I got bitten by the dot-com bug. It just looked like it was so fun, moving so fast. And I left my big job at Coca-Cola and I joined a startup no one had ever heard of before out in Los Angeles, about 5 blocks from the beach. And I think my boss thought I was having a nervous breakdown. My mother thought I had lost my mind. Who leaves a big job with a company that everyone's so impressed with? And my mom loved bragging to all her friends about my, business card and my title and all that. But the internet was just taking off. And I just fastened my seatbelt and had a great time. And I worked for 3 consecutive startups as the head of marketing, and all 3 had good exits. So that was really fun. I felt like I got in early and just was having a ball. 9/11 happened, and a lot of the funding dried up for the early stage companies, and people went into cash conservation mode. And because I had gotten lucky 3 times, I didn't have to work, but I was young and I wanted to jump in again. But there were just no marketing jobs to be had right after 9/11. And so I was just going to lay low and clean out my basement and take care of some family and personal business. And before I even had a chance to hit the pause button, people started coming out of the woodwork all the startups I had worked for were VC-backed private equity
Mm,
investors, and they were all struggling because their portfolio needed help and nobody had marketing departments. That was the way to conserve cash when the
mm,
markets were going crazy. So people were reaching out saying, Paige, can you help me? My company needs some marketing. We have a product launch coming up. We have a trade show. We don't have anyone to do the work. And you were the person that did the work, and I need you to do it again. And my first instinct was, I'm not a consultant. I never worked on the agency side. I knew what to do, but I wasn't on the service side. I was always the client,
mm,
the chief marketing officer. And they said, we don't need PowerPoint. We don't need advice. We need people to roll up their sleeves and get the job done. So my husband said, Paige, there's a big red flashing sign in front of you. You know what to do. Help these people, what they're asking for. So I started calling all my favorite marketing people from my corporate days and my startup days. Everybody had just gotten laid off because of 9/11. There were no more marketing jobs. I had people, I had projects, and I put them together. I called the women the marketing mavens and the guys the marketing moguls. And so when I'd email the group, I'd say, hey, Mavens and Moguls, I
mm,
have a possible project. Who's in, who's out? And so it was like my working name, but I never expected that would be like it was tongue in cheek. A
mhm,
maven it's a Yiddish word for expert, or my great grandmother would have said know it all.
mm,
And a mogul is someone of rank, power, or distinction in a certain area. And so these were all marketing experts.
mm,
And before I knew it, I had a lot of potential projects and we started forming teams. And because of my background going to school with a lot of people from all over and working at these global companies with a network of global contacts, I had people in 14 cities around the US. I had people in major metro areas around the globe. And when we had projects, so everyone was working out of their house, and so we were virtual well before coronavirus or any of that. And even though we were a virtual business, we always liked having a physical presence with the client if possible. So if the client was in New York or San Francisco or Chicago, Miami, the person in the network who lived there would be the team leader, but the team could be anywhere in the world. I had a former classmate from business school who lived in Singapore. She had a client that needed help, but she was not the expert. They needed market research, and she was not a market researcher. So she called me and said, do we have anybody in the Mavens network who I could work with on a research project? And of course, I had people on the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States who were perfect for her.
mm,
And so she was the team leader in Singapore, and people would get up in New York and start working on it. When they went to lunch, they'd pass it to the folks in Seattle. When the Seattle people went to sleep, they'd pass it back, to her. And she'd wake up the next morning and call the client and say, here's what we did yesterday. And they're like, wait a minute, we just met a few hours ago. How did you get all that done? And she's, oh, I've got a team all over. We're working around the clock for you. So it really worked from the get-go pretty seamlessly. We obviously had some hiccups and bumps in the road, but we were doing virtual marketing teams before it was trendy. And Harvard Business School actually wrote 2 cases on us, I think my 3rd year in business, and they were teaching it at business schools around the world. It was really cool because marketing was people outsource their accounting, their legal, their bookkeeping. People didn't really outsource marketing. They hired a marketing company like an ad agency, but they weren't used to outsourcing their brand. That felt like too close to the vest. But the way that we structured it, where we were basically like an extension of their team, all of us came from their side of the desk. We were the clients in a previous life. So we treated their brand and their money the way we would have spent the money
mm,
when we were the chief marketing officer. So it was a different model. I wasn't trying to cross sell or upsell. We didn't have a lot of overhead. I didn't need to keep these people on the payroll busy because they only got paid when they were working.
Mhm.
So we were a little bit ahead of our time, I think.
So let me break down that model for a minute, and thank you for all that insights on it. Your business is a broker, like a fractional CMO broker for corporations that need individualized service, whether it might be branding, whether it's marketing, whether it's e-commerce. And so you've collected in your stable experts from around your collected black book, if you will, of people who are either agency owners or marketing agency owners, et cetera, entrepreneurs or work for agencies that you then so you find the job and then you outsource the job to these individuals and then you work in a white glove partner collaborative capacity with them. That's how I understand it.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
We basically are an extension of our client's team. Sometimes we are the marketing department, and sometimes they may have some junior people that can execute, but they don't have that strategic voice of the customer.
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
can come in like a virtual CMO and help them set the strategy, be the voice of the customer, and then direct the junior resources to do the heavy lifting and manage the tactics. If that's, or sometimes they have a chief marketing officer, but that person needs to go on maternity leave for a few months, or
Yeah.
they're getting a hip replaced or a knee replaced, and they can't keep the trains running. So we step in and backfill for them, and then when they come back, there's no slack. They can just jump right into their role.
That's brilliant. I love the idea. It's something similar we do on our side as well, not as in depth or as obviously nearly as successful so far, but I can only hope. And you said something in early in that the breakdown you were doing on your origin story about these global contacts, right? So you went to Stanford, you went to Harvard, you've been in the corporate world, worked for some really high profile corporations. And so along the way, I'm assuming with your likable personality, you have developed, like I said, this stable of people, right? But not everybody has the opportunity to go to Harvard. Not everybody has the opportunity to go to Stanford. And not everybody has had the opportunities that you have had, that I shouldn't say that you have had, that you have earned. How would you advise younger entrepreneurs who are earlier in their career, having a relative amount of success, to be able to lean on the relationships and the contacts that they have built that don't have Harvards and Stanfords and Coca-Colas to tap into?
I am very lucky to have gone to the schools I went to and worked for the companies that I did early in my career. But you don't have to have that background to be successful by any means. I feel like, especially now with all the tools and technology, with Zoom, with online networking, with online apps, it's so easy to stay connected, to join online groups, to attend online events. But we live in a hybrid world now, so you can do conferences and trade shows, you can create events, even a podcast like you're doing. It's basically a platform, webinars, podcasts, to connect to anybody in the world. The bar is really low now. If you've got a cell phone and a computer, you've got access to anybody. You're on LinkedIn, you're probably connected to them within two or three people. And I think it's more about having a growth mindset of somebody who wants to learn and experiment and always looking for opportunities, keeping your antenna up and following. If you're a naturally curious person and you're questioning things, you can't stand still today. You've got to continually learn and grow. And I think for the people that are reading and listening and attending and connecting, you just have to be open for business. Have the mentality that I always say, I don't collect things, I collect people. I just feel like when you have interesting conversations, follow up, follow through, and see where they go.
Absolutely. Let me stop you there for a minute because you said something and I don't want to forget about it. Because I have a couple of different squiggly lines that you could take from this. You said the bar is low right now. And my interpretation of that is that we have 8.5 billion people on the planet that are all connected to one central resource, so to speak, social media, web, et cetera. And I'm just calling that one little atomic ball. So we have the opportunity to connect with potentially 8.5 billion. Is that right? Are we at 8.5 or 7.5? I forget. Whatever, 7.5 billion people on the planet. We have the potential to connect with all those people, which is the bar is low. But that doesn't mean that you have to do a half-assed job at it, because with the bar being low, and if you agree with this, please tell me, you have the opportunity to stand out in a sea of crowded people all competing for the same pace, for the same space. But if only a fraction of those people are still, you said you have to have a growth mindset. If only a fraction of those people have a growth mindset, then they're capitalizing on this low bar, but still utilizing all of the massive industrial techniques that they have with the growth mindset to stand out in this giant sea. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so when I started my marketing career at Procter and Gamble in 1990, there was print, television, radio, and outdoor advertising. Those were like your only line items in your budget for how to spend your budget. And
And those were lofty expenses in those days.
all of them were very expensive.
Sorry to interrupt. I
And
used to advertise. Sorry, I just want to get this point. I used to advertise in a magazine early in my photography career. And this was when I had just started doing entrepreneurial stuff. This was like in 2006-ish, where I really, really started investing in my business. And I remember having to drop like 4 or 5K. And that was a lot of money for a little dude who was a solopreneur, just to have this little 2 by 4 inch paid advertising in a magazine. And I just remember thinking, how many, not many entrepreneurs can, I'm losing my voice, sorry, but not many entrepreneurs can afford that.
no, you're
So
100% correct. And that was my point about there being a low bar. You had to have a lot of money and to advertise, to get a spokesperson, to get a celebrity to vouch for you cost a ton of money. Now, if you're Procter and Gamble or Coca-Cola, you can afford Super Bowl ads, you can afford to sponsor the Olympics. But yeah, small business people like you, the photographer, they don't really count in that world. The difference today is when I say the bar is low, everybody's got a megaphone. Social media gives everybody a platform. So you don't have to have a huge budget to get noticed. You just have to be creative and scrappy and know how to use the platforms that you have access to. And I think the lower your budget, the smaller amount of money you have, the more creative and scrappy you have to be to stand out. But that's not going to stop you. It just means you have to be smarter and more strategic about it.
yeah, brilliant.
You can't afford to run TV ads. That's lazy marketing because you can just
100%.
throw a bunch against the wall and something will stick. But when I was running marketing at these three startups, I didn't have P&G and Coca-Cola budgets. We were doing stuff, and sometimes it would be a complete nothing, and sometimes it would crash our site because we drew so much traffic so quickly.
Hold that thought for me, because I want to go into that brand, how you've grown that brand in a minute. But I did want to talk about something you just said that was really important. It's a burn the boat philosophy for me, and it's come, you either succeed or fail, and there is no turning back. So for anybody who doesn't understand that metaphor, I don't even know who it was. I think it was the Spanish back in early American conquest, where they came ashore and they're like, just, or maybe it was the Vikings, burn the boat because we only have one option here. We're going to attack and we're going to win. We're going to take the land. And it's a rather crude and rudimentary metaphor, but the idea behind it is, if you're going to jump into the entrepreneurial space, you have to have a frame and a mindset of burn the boat, because once I get into that space of burning the boat and I have no way of falling back to my old corporate job or whatever it is, you do have to find innovative ways to be creative and market yourself, especially if you're working on a small little guerrilla marketing budget that doesn't have a Coca-Cola or a Colgate. And I was doing a keynote with the master, or sorry, with a local networking group a couple weeks ago, and I have a decent business. I make a decent amount of revenue now. I've built a nice little company here, and somebody said the exact same question to me. That's all good and well, Devo, but I'm just getting started. So how are we supposed to do all these things? And I was like, bro, let me just stop here for a second and let's reflect for a minute, because I was once in your shoes, and I'm no Paige Arnof-Fenn, but I've had to build something from zero. I've never taken funding. I've never taken loans. I've never literally in my entire life tapped into anything but my own resources to build this company. And I've done that and continue to do that, which podcasting like we're doing now, I reach a massive audience because basically I'm just riding on your coattails. I'm like, I got this really cool woman on the phone that's done all these cool things. So people are going to listen to the show. They're not here to listen to Deevo. They're here to listen to Paige. But you can do those sorts of things if you know how to have conversations and connect with people. You can build your own podcast. It's relatively low cost of entry to start a podcast where your expenses are going to come in post-production, right? But podcasts, social media, webinars, mastermind groups, email marketing. There's so many different ways where after you've burned the boat, you can be innovative and creative to connect with people in a very small, low budget output, right?
100%. And I self-funded my business as well. I didn't take any money when I hung out a shingle for Mavens and Moguls.
Brilliant.
And I think what makes it work is you and I are doing what's authentic to us. And when you are resonating with what your personal strengths are, I don't have my own podcast. I like being a guest on other people's podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I love writing. I love speaking. I did before the pandemic, I spoke at lots of conferences all over the world. I had a monthly column in Forbes. I had a monthly column in Entrepreneur. Like, you got to stick to your knitting. What is unique, special, and different about you? Where can you stand out? And I always tell people, I think up and comers, they want to be everywhere. And I think you can't spread yourself too thin. I always recommend to small businesses, pick your lane, do what's the most authentic to you. If you like Twitter, X, do it. But you don't have to be on any, if you don't want to blog, by all means, do not start a blog. I think it can be a real mistake, and it can really detract and dilute your brand if you start a blog and the first week you're super excited and you blog 3 times, and then the next week you're a little busy, so you only have time for 1 blog posting. The next week you're traveling, you don't even have a chance to post. The following week you realize there were a few comments on the blog from before, but you don't want to get bogged down, so you just do 1 more new blog post. What you're doing is you're training your audience to say, this person's a little flaky, they're not that committed. A few weeks go by, they don't do any posts, then they come back and do 2. Don't do that. If you're not going to be committed and you're not going to really own it and make it the best it can be, just be a contributor to other people's blogs that are already getting a lot of traffic, and you can be that voice of reason. You can always make really smart comments, and if you're funny, you can be funny. You can always put in the signature who you are, how to find you. And every time Deevo comments, I'm like, I agree with that guy. He's so smart. Who is he? What does he do? And then they start following you and they want to connect with you. But you're building your brand one kind of morsel at a time, one breadcrumb
100%.
at a time. And so don't get sucked in to think you have to be on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. Don't do it all unless you're going to do it really well. Start
And,
with
and,
1 or 2.
and if I may, that is all sagely advice. If I may add one piece to that, is I find that especially entrepreneurs that I work with, that they're really excitable, right? They just want to just get into the fray. I've got this really cool idea and I just want to jump into the market. I'm just going to sell it to everybody. But they're not really clear who their audience is. They're not really clear on what their messaging is. They're not really clear on how they want to position themselves. They're not really clear on what's differentiating them between the similar people doing the same thing. And so they get fizzled out really quickly because they don't have early success. I'm working with a client right now and it's like, my social media is growing really slowly. I don't have a lot of people engaging. And I was like, but it is growing. But there's a lot of other things that you're not doing that we've asked you to do at this point, like starting to record daily videos about your core competencies and what problems do you solve. So I was like, instead of looking at your slow growing social media, which is a freaking beast to try to manage these days and compete in, it's a crowded marketplace, man. So I was like, so what can we do on the outside of this that you're really good at, that you're really passionate about, where you can add some value and solve other people's problems? And he's like, just wrote an ebook and I've got all these really cool ideas. And I was like, well, let's talking about that, man. So the first week he showed up on YouTube, it was like the biggest video he'd ever done. And he came back and he's like, man, you're right. I was like, yeah, man, I am right. And you just have to believe in that space. But one thing you said that I really want to call out in that really long diatribe I just rattled off is that you have to understand what problem you solve for whomever it is you're trying to sell to, or you're trying to market to, or you're trying to build a relationship with. Because there's a pretty good chance in this massive marketplace that we're all just talking about that somebody else is doing something very similar to you, right? So, in the terms of brand messaging and perception, like your audience perception, how important is it? And what are some of your insights and advice on early entrepreneurs and business people who are maybe trying to scale a new product? How do they separate themselves by really clearly defining the problem that they solve and then transferring that into some sort of a brand message so that they can affect the brand perception of what they do, why they do it, how they do it, problems they solve?
Great question. As I said, I started my marketing career at Procter and Gamble. P&G is probably the most data-driven consumer products company in the world. Everything starts with market research and who is your audience and what motivates them to purchase. So my bias, I'm just going to put it out there, is it all starts with your customer. It's not what you think. It's not what I think. It's not what your mother, your best friend, your neighbor, those people don't care. You need to talk to your target audience. And again, you can do Zoomerang, SurveyMonkey. When I worked at P&G and G and Coke, market research was a huge budget item. It was always statistically significant. We would talk to more than 1,000 people, and the research would get fielded in different regions or different parts of the world. It could take 6, 9, 12 months to get the data back and tabulated and sliced and diced and analyzed. Startups and small businesses don't have the luxury of time or budget to do a huge market research study. When I worked at my first startup in Los Angeles, the one that was 5 blocks from the ocean, my team would come in the morning with coffee. We'd sit in the conference room. We'd throw up a bunch of ideas on the whiteboard. We'd do some quick and dirty mock-ups. At lunch hour, we would go down to the Strand on the beach, and we'd intercept anyone that looked like they were our target audience, which were 18 to 24-year-old males that
Talk
were
about grassroots marketing.
yeah, very guerrilla. They had body tattoos, they had piercings, and we'd intercept them and we'd give them kind of swag if they'd spend a few minutes answering questions. This wasn't a formal mailed in survey. This wasn't a focus group behind a one-way mirror. This was literally intercepting guys at lunch hour and offering them some t-shirts and CDs if they'll spend 5 minutes answering a few questions and reacting to stuff we had on a clipboard. After 2 hours on the Strand, we'd all come back to the conference room and we'd tally up our votes and we'd decide that moment what we were going to put up on the site for banner ads and pop-ups before we went home that night. And we'd get a bunch of them up on the website. We'd go home, we'd come back the next morning, meet back in the conference room with our coffee, and we'd tally up, okay, which ones got the most click-throughs? Which ones followed the breadcrumbs and purchased on the website? And we would just iterate, literally, we might do that 2 or 3 times in a week, and we got better each time. We got more traffic, more click-throughs, more everything was moving in the right direction. And again, maybe we only talked to 100 people, but you get really great feedback and it doesn't have to be perfect. I
How
think,
can you take that exercise from, because you can't, there's so many more tools at your disposal now today with social media and digital tools and what.
by
How
all
can
the
you
social listening,
yeah, how can you take those same tools of walking on the Strand and going up to buff dudes running half naked on the beach, which I'm sure that was the primary motivation here. Sure, Paige. You weren't married in those days. Who he looks like my target market. How do you take that and transfer it in today's marketplace, given all the different types of tools? So if I'm an early entrepreneur and I come to you and I say, hey, I'd like to hire you as my mentor, I'm really struggling with really clarifying my brand message and really understanding the problems that I solve. What are some exercises that I can do from your purview to really crystallize that message?
There are a lot of social listening tools that you can use now, online tools where you can search by keywords. You can slice and dice. Again, if you know who your audience is, or if you have a primary, secondary, tertiary audience, you can use that as a lens to see what those people are searching for. What is their path? What are the words that are the most emotionally charged for them? You can look at the beautiful thing about all the online tools now is you're capturing so much data. All of, again, in the P&G and Coke years, we had to wait every month. We would get data from Nielsen or IRI that would tell you who watched the TV show, how many people bought your product at Walmart or Target. You had to wait for your monthly data dump. Now you can look on Google Analytics or whatever tools you're using, and you can see exactly what gateways,
Mm.
what are the search terms people are using, who are the websites that are feeding you the most traffic, where are people dropping off on your website, where are you losing people? Maybe that it's a communications problem, maybe it's a messaging problem. You have to be very comfortable with the data. And all, again, back to the growth mindset. There are so many new tools and technologies constantly coming into the market. And whether you listen to podcasts or webinars or trade magazines, trade websites, you always have to be educating yourself. You can join professional networking groups and go to classes online, still trying to stay up to date as much as possible. And again, it's almost like a tsunami of stuff.
Mm.
Maybe your group and your company need to divide and conquer so that each person can have a certain area of expertise that they really go deep into that area. You mentioned video is a great tool, and now you've got this whole group of young people. They don't really like to read. They'd much rather watch something, and the shorter and sweeter, the better.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to reach a young audience and you're not testing and using video, you're probably leaving a lot of opportunity on the table.
Yeah.
It's all about knowing who you're targeting and what real estate you already own in their brain. What does your competitor own? What real estate is up for grabs? And what are those kind of emotional hot buttons that help you connect and get to that audience faster, better, in a more compelling way?
Mhm.
And I think you probably, I don't know if you remember this or not, but when Amazon started, when they were a brand new company, their tagline was the world's biggest bookseller, I think.
Mhm.
All they did was sell books. That was where they put their stake in the ground. And this was way before e-commerce. People didn't just put their credit card online. They were afraid they'd get their
Yeah, I
credit
remember
card
that.
number
Yeah.
stolen. So when Amazon started, they said, we're going to sell you books. You want to buy a book? Come to Amazon. And guess what? It worked.
Mhm.
People tried it and nobody stole their credit card number and they got the book very fast. And they thought, wow, that's great. Now Amazon has a relationship. Now they want to sell you CDs and music. So they branched out a little more. And guess what? That
Yeah.
worked out great too.
They sell
And
everything more than CDs and music now, don't they? Like literally
yeah,
everything. I
and
had an
US
individual, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I have some other really important questions, so just bear with me. I had an individual the other day that I met who literally refused. He has a product that he wants to sell on the internet because that's what he's being told to do. And he doesn't want to sell the product on the internet because he once had his credit card stolen, and he's afraid that if he asks other people to give him his credit card, that they're not going to do that. And I was like, bro, first of all, everyone on the planet probably already has access to your credit card if they know how to dig. Okay. There's so much information, to your point about data. And that was my key takeaway from what you said. I love everything you said there. Is that if you're a solopreneur or a small business owner and you want to really make a dent and have some impact with this new product, this new service that you're offering to your audience, know your data. And you can really quickly, there's a lot of tools at your disposal, whether it be social media analytics, Google Analytics, just doing simple searches by like your product name on just on Google and see what else comes up so you can see what works. So I want to fast forward a little bit into your career. This is a good conversation. We're running out of time, so I'm going to start talking really fast so we can do all the questions, okay? You've had the opportunity to work with some really big names like the Colgate, Virgin, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, just to name a few. What were some of the pivotal moments that you learned in your corporate career that enabled you to transfer that into your entrepreneurial career? So what are those like parallels that both corporate and entrepreneurial have that have really enabled you to become a leader in the industry and really solidify what your brand offers to the world?
The marketing basics still apply, whether it's a small business or a big multinational global brand. Who's your audience? What motivates them? What are they looking for? What are the benefits to them? What's in it for them?
Hmm.
Nobody really cares about your features and all the shiny bells and whistles. They want to know how it's going to make their lives easier, if it's going to save them time, save them money. So that's a universal marketing given. And people cannot remember 10 different things. They can remember maybe one or two, certainly no more than three. When you think about the great brands in the world, what space do they own? And it's probably Apple's about enabling creativity and making you feel more creative in your life and just enjoying technology can be fun.
And the
Uh,
simplicity of use.
the simplicity, the kind of minimalist design, all of that,
Mhm.
very clean. McDonald's is about convenience. Starbucks is about having a place you can go to where you're not at work, you're not at home, but it's like another place to chill out. And if you think about it, a brand is a promise of a consistent experience and that when you show up, what to expect. If you walked into a McDonald's or a Starbucks in any city and it was like a different menu and different decor, and you would be confused. Brands are about building trust and building relationships. And what can you do with whether it's a small business, a nonprofit, B2B, B2C, what can you do to build that relationship, build that emotional connection, and build that trust with your target audience? That
Let's,
doesn't change.
let's move into something. I want to get your opinion on this. Just fill in this last word, okay? Like an old Mad Lib. Do you remember Mad
I
Libs?
love Mavens.
All right, so it's one word. People don't buy products, they buy.
Experiences, they buy
Damn, girl. I wrote
brands.
that down right here. I wanted to see what you would say. So we're right on point with that one. And it's true. And I want you to speak to that for a second because you started to already touch on that. You talked about a brand as a promise. You talked about a little bit, we're going into the brand perception, right? That's where I want to talk a little bit about. And when I think about, let me tell you a story. So I worked with a client many years ago who is in the medical wellness field and really good at what he does, but didn't have any idea how to attract a larger audience base. And he was really frustrated because people just don't know what this is about and how I can make a difference and all these different things. And I was like, tell me a little bit about your business. And I just as a little experiment, I want you to record a video for me. Okay. Just I'm not here between now and the next meeting we have next week. I want you to go on your camera and I want you to record a video for me. And I want you to tell me what you do and why you do it and all these great things about yourself. And so the week later, I watched the video and the dude is pissed off, man. He's talking about how nobody wants to listen to what he has to say and nobody understands anything. And everyone's just like going the wrong direction. And I like paused it halfway the video. I was like, dude, if you were watching me say this stuff, what would you think? And I would think you're a grumpy bastard. And I was like, think you're a grumpy bastard. Like all you're doing is complaining in this entire video. And that's your brand perception. If that's how you're showing up right now and telling people when they walk in your storefront or when you're out on the street or you're at a networking event and all you do is bitch and moan, people are going to think all this dude is the bitch and moaner. So how can we reshape that brand perception so that people actually see your true value? How can you soften your message perhaps? How can you stop dropping F-bombs in the middle of a video? How can you stop being so grumpy? How can you make eye contact? There's all these different things. So if you can for a minute, can you share your vision? And we're running out of time, so you're going to talk really fast like me. Can you share your vision around brand perception and how important it is that you don't look at your business from your point of view, you look at your business from your buyer's point of view, and what do they think about your brand? Hello, Kat.
So
And look who just joined us. Bobcat did. He wants to learn about brand perception too. Go down, buddy.
I think the problem is people try and push in marketing. Marketing's about pulling, it's not about pushing. And so I think the guy that's going off the rails, I think you need to think of it, like you said, from the other perspective. What else do they have? What else do they need? Where are the gaps? Where are the holes? And what can you tell them? What are those breadcrumbs that will pull them to you? I feel like where people really, again, when all you're doing is talking about yourself and looking at what you need, that's not their problem. That's not there. Nobody wakes up in the morning wondering how you're going to do better today. You have to
Why
give them,
not? It's all about me. Don't you know how important I think I am?
but what is in it for them?
Yeah.
What are they trying to achieve? How are you going to make them better, happier, skinnier, smarter, save them time, save them money? And if you look at it from that perspective, and if you're in it for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons, I think, again, back to the growth mindset. If everything to you is a zero-sum game, if you win, I'm losing. People that approach any category that way, it's a losing proposition. I think if we can both benefit, and if you don't have to pick up every penny, if you can leave a little money on the table, let people think they're getting a great deal, over deliver, give them more value than what they signed up for, they're going to turn into huge champions and ambassadors for you.
Raving fans.
Exactly. And they're going to bring people to you saying, oh my God, I had a great experience. I got so much value. These guys are so smart. They over delivered. I can't believe they charged me X and I feel like I would have paid twice as much.
And
That is money in the bank.
everything that you're saying right there is from the brand's perspective, which is their perception. They over delivered. I can't believe how amazing this product was. I can't believe how much I got bang for my buck. I can't believe the problems that they solved. Again, don't look at it from your purview. What are you doing for the customer? I always tell everybody, never sell, solve a problem. Never sell, solve a problem. And that goes back to what you said, pull, don't push. And that's what marketing is. And it's really interesting to me because part of that brand perception, and you've done this as the entire podcast, and I'm sure you know it, or maybe you don't because you're just so good at what you do, but you're always telling a story. In every situation, you're always telling a story. And that doesn't mean you have to sit down with your book and rattle off all the things that you're good at. It means how can you find a target audience that will appreciate and resonate with your story of why you do something? Don't sell, tell a story solve a problem by telling a story. And I
So
know this is really, sorry, go
my
ahead.
phrase is stop selling, start sharing. When
Beautiful.
you share what you know, and it can be the good, the bad, and the ugly. People love the war stories. They
Yes.
love to hear where you got knocked around and you got back up and you figured it out and you moved forward. But if you stop trying to sell them and just share what it is you love, what it is you learned, what it is that makes your life more fun, more interesting, they're going to appreciate that. It's more authentic, and people remember stories. They don't remember facts and figures.
Mm.
Spewing out a bunch of data is not user friendly.
That's your
Telling
job to look at the data, not theirs.
bingo.
I love that piece. And as we bump up towards the end of I need another hour and a half with you to really be honest with you. We're going to have to do this again, part 2 with Paige. The whole piece around storytelling is really lost on a lot of people because they believe that their point in branding or their point in marketing is that they have to show everybody how good they are. But that's not what resonates with audiences. That's not what resonates with buyers. And you mentioned earlier the marketing budgets of the Cokes and the Colgates and all the different industries that you've worked in. They spend millions and millions of dollars on telling a story. If you watch television, which I don't really watch anymore, and you look at a commercial, in every single situation, there's a story being sold. Maybe it's the sick woman for the pharmaceutical. Maybe it's the polar bear sliding down on their ass in the snow, sharing a Coke with another polar bear. Maybe it's like in a beer person, like it's an end of like a bunch of dudes sitting around a bar after playing a rough basketball game and they're clinging the bottle of beer. But in every situation, they're making a relatable experience that they think their target audience would resonate with. So when Paige says things like tell your story, never sell, marketing is pulling, not pushing. What you're saying, if I may paraphrase for those who are listening, is that your job is to find people who like your story, who resonate with your story, not your product, and tell why you made the product. Tell how you struggled with the product. Tell about the problems that your product can solve for them. Don't say, buy from me. Tell a story and make yourself relatable. And don't be grumpy when you do it.
Yeah, great stories transcend the product or service that you're
Mm.
selling. And again, if you can connect with people on an emotional level, that is the dream. When you do that, they're going to be your customer and your champion and your ally for life.
That might be one of the keynotes of this podcast is the emotional piece. And I don't think a lot of people consider the psychology of buying and the psychology of relationships. And I always use an example. I have a keynote that I do on relationships. And I always do this whole thing on customer perception and relationships. And I use the example of when you're married, right? When you met your husband, you didn't, I'm assuming you didn't go get married the next day. You may have flown off to Vegas. But in that journey of getting to know and marry your husband ultimately, there was a courting phase, right? That customer journey, right? There was the courting, there was the get to know you, there was the sharing of the stories, there was the meeting of the family, and there was all these little milestones along the way. And people forget that no matter how many tools we have at our disposal today, which we have a massive amount of tools, you still have to follow the journey. You still have to be in love with the process. You still have to put in the time and the energy and the resources to build that relationship with the customer. And in that relationship, there are stop offs and milestones along the way, right? Every single relationship you build, whether it's through social media, whether it's through an email, whether it's a blog, you're first attracting somebody. So you guys met across, maybe your husband's one of those buff dudes you met on the beach who did one of your market surveys. But I don't know. Let's find out about that story. But you still had to have the meetup, right? And then you had the get to know each other phase. In the customer journey, if you can for a minute, talk about how important it is for a business owner, an entrepreneur, to be really familiar with what that customer journey looks like so that every point along the way they can inject some story, some wisdom, some insight, some problem solving.
So I'm sure you run into clients like this as well, where they come to you, and the analogy I always use is they're coming to you wanting this master suite on the third floor.
Yeah.
And they can tell you every like feature they want in the master suite. And it's like, all right, I hear you. But before you build the third floor, we need a foundation to this house.
Bam.
And once we build the foundation, then we're going to do an awesome first floor. And you're going to have your family room and your kitchen. It's going to be awesome. Second floor is going to be great. And only then are we going to even be able to envision this master suite that you want. You don't start at the end. You have to start with the foundation. Again, you've talked about perception a lot. Perception is reality in marketing. If
Mm.
people think it, then that unfortunately becomes their truth. And on the customer journey, you gotta crawl before you walk, you gotta walk before you run. And I just feel like people get a little ahead of themselves sometimes and they don't do it's not sexy, it's not glamorous, but start with understanding who your target audience is. What are they doing now without you? What are they missing? Where are the gaps? Where are the needs? How can you solve their problems? And
Mm.
if you start there and you listen and you basically start with a bunch of open-ended questions. The problem with market research is garbage in and garbage out. If you lead the witness, if you say to them, how great is my product? What do you love about my service? That is not the way you're going to get good feedback. You have to be able, nobody's going to tell you your baby's ugly. And if you can't listen to people giving
Elaine
you,
Bennis will.
that's true. That's a good one.
Remember that
But
episode?
yeah,
Sorry. I couldn't help
Seinfeld.
myself because when we talked about Elaine Bennis and that new show that you were telling me about. So sorry, can't carry on. My bad.
But basically, you want to do research that is grounded in reality.
Hmm.
And you need honest feedback, candid feedback. The problem that a lot of people have with market research is, and again, you may have clients that come to you this way as well. They're completely flummoxed. They're like, everybody says they love my product and my service, but we're not selling. How can that be? Everyone loves it. And I'm like, okay, who loves it? Who have you talked to? Tell me about your research. It wasn't really research, but I talked to my mom, I talked to my best friend, I talked to my neighbor. Everybody thinks it's a brilliant idea, but nobody's buying it. Okay, that is not market research. You're talking to people who love you and don't want to hurt your feelings, and they're not being honest with you. You got to start with a candid conversation, and you have to be willing and open to hear negative feedback. And if
Mm.
that's not the case, you need to outsource the research to someone like me or someone like you that can ask an objective question in an objective way and not lead the witness. I think the customer journey needs to be grounded in reality, not perception. And it needs to, you kick the tires and look under the hood and
Mm.
you test and you don't take assumptions for granted. You dig and you ask why, and people care about the why.
Yeah.
They don't so much care about the what, but they want to know why. The why is your purpose. Why are you doing it? Why is this better? Why are you different?
I love the why. It's a little overused in today's vernacular, but I don't think a lot of people actually stop to be introspective on what it really means and really understand how it affects them. One thing I want to add to that last piece, and really important because you said something earlier in the conversation, is when you're doing the data research, when you're trying to interview your ideal client, when you're trying to gather what matters to your potential buyer, take the time to actually listen because it's a fruitless exercise if you go out and do all of this market research or spend the time to understand your pitfalls, but then you still ignore it and be like, those people are wrong, then there's something wrong with your tendency there. You might want to take a look at that and get some therapy on it, to be honest with you. But my grandfather used to tell me, Devi, the good Lord gave you two ears and one mouth for a reason. What do you think that means? And I was like, I don't know. And he would grab me by the ear. He's like, can you hear me? And I was like, damn it, you're right. So stop talking so much, unless you're on a podcast, and listen to what your people are saying. All right, our last piece. I'm going to put you on the hot seat. I'm going to give you two specific questions. So the first question is more of a scenario based. I want to see how you would handle something like this. You have a long-term client that you've been working with for years and been really serving them well and have this fantastic relationship with them. But something that you just did recently has found them to be dissatisfied with some recent work. And they're considering potentially switching to one of your competitors. How do you, A, address their concerns, rebuild their trust, and implement any necessary changes to prevent this from happening, A, with them and from any future clients?
So I think it's really important when things don't go as planned and maybe backfire or you lose ground, you have to do a postmortem analysis and understand really carefully what went wrong and why.
Mhm.
I think when things are successful, people rarely stop and say, why did this work? Or how did this become such a great success? But I think it's imperative on all of us when things don't go well, you really do need to stop, hit the pause button, and really do the dirty work to figure out where things went off road and how to get them, where is the on ramp to get them back. Now, the truth is, you're not always, even if you do that and you figure it out, they may go to a competitor. And if that happens, I grew up in the deep South, and my philosophy has always been kill them with kindness,
Mhm.
wish them well, do not burn that bridge. Life is very funny in that way. People can come back in other reincarnations down the road.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because when we have lost business, either pitching and they pick another firm, or a long-term relationship that decides to go use another firm after years with you, it's interesting. I think how you behave and how you act in those kind of downtimes says more about your character than when things are going well. And I think you have an opportunity to leave a very positive, lasting impression.
Mm.
It makes them almost second guess their decision,
That's
because I've
that,
had people that either picked another firm or left us to go to another firm, and I've stayed in touch and I've taken the high road, kill them with kindness. You get more bees from honey. And they come back and they say, you were so gracious, or you were so honest about why, if they hired another firm that said they could do it for half the money and half the amount of time, I would tell them, I wish I could do that too. In my experience, I don't know how they're going to get there from here. But if you don't find what you're looking for, let us know. We'd love to work with you. And they come back and they
mhm.
say, oh my God, you were so honest and you were so gracious that, and they end up referring business to you, even though they went another direction. They said, we left them to go work with this other agency, but I regret that we didn't keep with them. They're
Mhm.
so genuine, they're so authentic, and they're really good, and they're very professional and even keel, and we like being associated with firms like that.
So what I heard from that takeaway is even in your post-mortem, when you're losing business, your customer journey doesn't stop. You have an opportunity to, as you say, be gracious in the exit, but you're still not burning that bridge because that customer journey it's a loop. It's a loop, right? And so there's an opportunity for future business. And what's really cool about that, and I love that story, because maybe the CEO of that company, for example, that you were doing long time relationship with, and they left you. Maybe you don't know what's going on in their business. Maybe they're on their own exit out and they're about to launch a new brand or jump ship. And if you did handle that with grace and consistency and quality, who are they going to think about first? So it's really important to understand that your customer journey never really stops, and people are always listening. And
And
and I,
that in fact has happened to us with the CEO.
mm,
It's also happened to us with board members.
mm,
Went and joined other boards and recommended the new company hire us, or the CEO brought us to the next job, even though the old job stopped using us. So
mm.
that is real life.
Yeah, that's really great sagely advice from the Maven herself. So thank you for that. In terms of my last question for you, it's my hot seat question. Okay, so it's just
We've
like
all been hot seat questions.
you've handled them with grace, so I really appreciate it. You have the opportunity to collaborate with a historical figure, let's say, somebody who's really you've admired, whether it's something you've read in a biography or maybe someone you've worked with or whomever it is, but it has to be historical, somebody from your past. And you have the opportunity to collaborate with them on a branding campaign. Okay, so we're throwing a little loop in this question. Who would you choose to collaborate with? And what kind of campaign would you create together? And what sort of impact would you like to make with this campaign?
I guess I would have loved to have been a collaborator with Guy Kawasaki when he was working with Steve Jobs in the early days at Apple. I think that would have been like a master class
Mm,
in everything. customer, brand, marketing, like everything they did. And they didn't get it all right. They had hiccups, they had speed bumps, they ran into walls. But I know Steve Jobs was a difficult guy, but Guy Kawasaki is brilliant. I follow him. I listen to his podcast. I've read a lot of what he's written, and I think it would have been an amazing collaboration because they were
So what would you
so.
do in this collaboration though? What, because you have to solve a problem. Remember, where you're building a business, you're branding your business. So you're working with Guy Kawasaki, you're solving a problem, and what's the output of this problem you're trying to solve?
Oh, wow. So many problems in the world that need solving. In a way, I'd almost repurpose and take all his smarts and channel it and redirect it to something around like healthcare or world peace,
Hmm.
something like humanity oriented, not just to sell more computers or to sell more stuff. I think solving a big global humanitarian issue would be incredible, like getting the message right, getting the emotional connection right, and helping save lives with whether it's medicine or research or food. Somebody like that would just be an amazing kind of brain thinking partner to break through barriers and to look at situations with a completely fresh eye and fresh approach to solving famine, disease, anything like that. Again, world peace, anything like that. If those people, I don't know, I feel like his brain could be put to use to solve real global issues.
Well, it's phenomenal that you said that because we were just studying him in a case study in my mastermind group, and he would, if he had the opportunity to work with you, his whole philosophy was around making money. I mean, not making money, making meaning, and innovating with purpose, and becoming a catalyst for change, and having empathy and understanding for your client, and this whole idea around continuous learning and always being able to adapt and make pivots and always be listening to your audience, listening to your loved ones, listening to the people that are around you, so that you have a better, more introspective and self-aware approach to everything you do. So I love that you said that. There's so many different things that you said today that we've talked about that really resonated with us on storytelling and never selling and solving a problem, and marketing is not is always pulling, not pushing. I love that. I'm going to use that if you don't mind. To listen,
Use it.
perception is reality, the customer journey. It's just really been for anybody who's listening. And some of my final question to you, and thank you for being here. I really appreciate this time that you've shared with me. For anyone who's listening to this show that might be in the early stages of their entrepreneurial career, or they're scaling, or they're launching a new product, and they're a bit frustrated, and they're a bit starting to become a bit ambivalent around maybe imposter syndrome, or how are they going to do this, and they're bumping up against all sorts of curbs and bumpers, what would you say to them?
Keep learning. It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you keep getting back up.
Mhm, mhm.
I have so many articles and videos on my website. I think anybody who makes it sound like it's been easy is lying. I think I've got all the war wounds and scars to prove it. There are no shortcuts. There are plenty of detours on the path, but nobody gets a free pass. There's not like a line that you can stand in where you're in the express lane. It doesn't work that way. Careers are bumpy, and sometimes you go lateral and sometimes you take a step back before you take two or three steps forward. And I would say encourage that growth mindset to manifest, to keep learning, keep growing, find mentors. Don't be so hard on yourself. It takes a lot to create a successful and fulfilling, gratifying life and career. And sometimes you only learn what you're good at by being bad at other stuff. And sometimes you only, like I said, don't be scared to fail. Failure is about your learning. I always say you either win or you learn. You
Mm,
never fail.
mm,
If you don't make that mistake again and you keep moving forward, That's awesome. That's the game. Try It's almost like you need to keep pushing and getting out of your comfort zone so that you do fail, because otherwise you're not pushing hard enough.
Mm.
You need to figure out what works, and the only way you can do that is to figure out what doesn't work.
Mm.
So stay positive, be resilient, and just keep marching. You learn to do by doing.
I love it. She's Paige Arnof-Fenn. She is the OG Maven of Mavens and Moguls. You can find her on mavensandmoguls.com. You're on LinkedIn. Do you have a preferred channel that you would like people to reach out to you, or just go to the website?
Website or LinkedIn would be great.
Okay. It's mavensandmoguls.com. You should know how to spell that. If you're not, you probably shouldn't be listening to the show, but the notes will be in the link below this when we publish this. Paige, I really appreciate the conversation. There were so many seeds of wisdom and insights and thought seed that you drop for anyone who's listening to this show, whether you're an established entrepreneur or a CEO of a fledgling business, that you can learn from. And I appreciate you taking the time to all of your things you have going on to step into our little virtual studio today and share your insights with us. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a really fun discussion.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you for joining us on this really insightful episode of the Branding Laboratory with the Maven herself, our esteemed guest, Paige Arnof-Fenn. What a fantastic conversation, and so many nuggets and morsels that she dropped and that we discussed that you can learn from to grow your own business in this branding laboratory. So we really loved exploring her journey from the corporate world to the entrepreneur and some of the pivotal moments and lessons. I love how she said you either win or you learn, and that's a phenomenal piece of advice. And the learnings that she has utilized to shape her success and her insights into branding and marketing and storytelling and listening and brand perception. Again, I could go on and on. If you enjoyed this episode today, I really would invite you to subscribe below, leave us a review, and share it with your network. And if you know somebody who you think would enjoy being a guest on the show and can sit in the hot seat with me, and I'm sure they can, but have some insightful tips and lessons that they can share with our audience, please recommend them. You can put them in the comments below, or you can reach out to our producers. All the information is in the show. It's somewhere. I'm pointing my fingers as if I know where it is. I think it's here, there. I'm not really sure. But anyhow, stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with industry leaders like Paige. And if you're ready to elevate your brand and connect with us and learn more about what we do in developing personal brand work, or telling your brand story, or connecting with a larger audience, whether it's through websites, social media, or just your brand messaging in general, please drop a note on our website. It's thebrandinglaboratory.com or thebrandstoryteller.com, which is my company. You can also find me at deevotindall.com. Yeah, that's right. I have 3 domains, baby. So anyhow, I look forward to connecting with you and sharing all of the amazing stories and the amazing people that I've had the privilege and the honor to connect with. Until next time, keep innovating and telling your unique story, because everyone else is taken. There's only one you. Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon.